I never thought I'd see my best friend's mom like that, but that afternoon changed everything. My name's Nathan. I'm 20, a college student in Denver, working part-time at a bookstore downtown. Pretty regular life, classes, shifts, gym, the occasional hang with friends. Mark's been my best friend since high school. We've been through everything together. Late night cramming, dumb road trips, one botched attempt at building a treehouse when we were 17. His place always felt like a second home to me. His mom, Isabella, was always just there, pleasant, polite, sort of in the background. I never thought much beyond that. It was one of those early spring days where the sun's out, but there's still a bit of chill in the air. I'd borrowed a book from Mark, something for one of my classes, and I figured I'd swing by to drop it off. No big deal. I didn't even text ahead. Figured I'd just hand it off and head out. I pulled up to their house, like I'd done 100 times before. Same quiet street, same blue house with the flower pots by the door. I rang the bell, expecting Mark to swing it open with his usual half grin and sarcastic, "Finally returning it, huh?" But it wasn't Mark. The door opened, and there was Isabella, wrapped in nothing but a towel. I froze. She didn't. "Hey, Nathan," she said like it was the most normal thing in the world. Her voice was casual, even warm, like we were just two neighbors catching up on the porch. Her dark hair was damp and loose over her shoulders, little drops still clinging to her collarbone. The towel was snug, tucked securely, but my brain stalled anyway, suddenly registering her in a way I never had before. "Oh, hi," I stammered, eyes darting anywhere but directly at her. "I just came to drop this off for Mark." She chuckled softly, completely unbothered. "Come in for a minute. He's out, but I think he mentioned something about being back soon." I hesitated. My brain said, "Leave the book and go." My feet didn't listen. "Sure," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled like lavender and something fresh from the shower. She walked ahead, her towel leaving her shoulders bare, and I kept my gaze glued to the book in my hand, like it was the most important object on earth. She disappeared down the hall for a second, and I stood awkwardly by the kitchen where sunlight poured in across the counter. A few moments later, she came back, same towel, just now with a mug of tea in her hand. "Want something?" she asked, motioning toward the kettle. "I'm good," I said quickly, clearing my throat. "Just wanted to drop this off." But she didn't seem in a rush. She sat on a stool by the counter, crossing her legs carefully, and took a sip. "You always seem in a hurry, Nathan. Busy life?" I laughed nervously. "Something like that. Classes, work, same old stuff." She looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second I felt weirdly transparent, like she could see right through whatever calm I was faking. "You've grown up a lot," she said, not in a flirtatious way, just quiet and certain. "Last time I saw you, I think you still had that wild hair thing going on." I rubbed the back of my neck, chuckling. "Yeah, I got a little better at using shampoo." She laughed lightly, and I realized I hadn't heard her laugh like that before. It wasn't polite or forced. It was easy, unguarded. The conversation drifted. Books, the weather. She asked about my job at the bookstore, what I was studying. I asked how things were going with her freelance work. Graphic design, I think. And she talked about working from home, how quiet the house got sometimes. "It's funny," she said, looking out the window. "Sometimes I hear the doorbell and think it's no one. But today, nice surprise." I didn't know what to say to that. My chest felt warm in a way I couldn't blame on the tea. I checked my phone. "I should probably get going," I said. "Didn't mean to interrupt your day." She nodded but didn't move. "You didn't. It's nice having someone to talk to, even just for a few minutes." I left the book on the table. She stood to walk me out. At the door, she rested her hand on the edge and smiled again. That same soft look that didn't feel like it belonged to my best friend's mom anymore. "Tell Mark I stopped by," I said. "I will," she replied. "Next time, stay a little longer." I stepped out into the sunlight, heart weirdly offbeat. As the door clicked shut behind me, I walked to my car, not looking back, but fully aware something had changed, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days passed, but I kept thinking about that afternoon, about Isabella, about the towel, sure, but more than that, the way her voice sounded when she said, "Next time, stay a little longer." I couldn't tell if she meant anything by it, but it stuck with me. I didn't bring it up to Mark. Obviously, it felt like one of those things that just sits in the background, waiting. I saw her again at a local bookstore downtown, Maple and Ink, a little quieter than the chain stores, a couple of blocks from campus, always playing jazz in the background, like they're trying to slow the whole world down. I didn't expect to see anyone I knew, but there she was, Isabella, in the fiction aisle, half hidden behind a display of staff pics. Her hair was pulled back in a loose twist, sunglasses perched on her head. She wore a light denim jacket over a black turtleneck and slim jeans, stylish but casual, like she hadn't tried too hard and somehow still looked perfect. She was scanning the spines of books, like she was trying to remember something she once read. I almost turned around. I don't know why. It wasn't like I had a reason to avoid her. Maybe it was just that little flutter in my chest that caught me off guard. But before I could overthink it, she looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, we both just blinked, surprised. "Hey," I said, walking over. "Didn't expect to see you here." She smiled, closing the gap between us. "Nathan, what are the odds?" "Small city," I said. "Or fate," she joked, eyes twinkling. We stood in the quiet space between shelves. She held a paperback in one hand, her thumb tucked in the middle. I glanced at the cover. The Unbearable Lightness of Being. "Heavy choice," I teased. She smirked. "I like books that make me think, even if they leave me feeling kind of unsettled." I nodded. "I get that, Ethan." We ended up wandering the aisles together, talked about books we liked, authors we didn't understand, why some stories linger long after you finish them. She told me she liked quiet endings, ones that didn't try to wrap everything in a bow. I told her I always thought books say more about the reader than the writer. She looked at me a little longer than necessary after that. After a while, she checked her watch. "I cooked way too much dinner for one tonight," she said casually. "Would be a shame to let it go to waste." I blinked. "Are you inviting me?" She tilted her head. "If you don't have plans." I didn't, or at least I suddenly didn't. We walked to her car, sleek, silver, spotless. The ride was short, quiet, comfortable. At her house, she kicked off her shoes and handed me a bottle of sparkling water, like we'd done this 100 times before. The air smelled faintly of garlic and rosemary. She'd made some kind of roasted chicken with vegetables, warm and rich and real, not takeout or frozen made. Dinner was easy. Conversation just flowed. She told me about how she used to come to that bookstore when she first moved to Denver, back when Mark was still in elementary school, said it was one of the few places she ever felt like herself. I asked her what she meant. She shrugged, swirling the stem of her wine glass slowly. "You'll understand when you're older. Some places just give you back to yourself." We sat in the living room afterward, plates cleared, music playing low from the Bluetooth speaker. The light was dim, just the small lamp by the corner and the last glow from the setting sun outside the windows. She tucked her legs beneath her on the couch, turning slightly toward me. "It's funny," she said after a moment, her voice quieter now. "You've known Mark for years, and yet I feel like I'm only just meeting you." I smiled. Maybe I just wasn't that interesting before. She looked at me, a thoughtful kind of pause hanging in the space between us. Or maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. The way she said it made something shift in the air. Not heavy, not dramatic, just a warmth, a small realization growing in the silence. When it got late, I stood to leave. She walked me to the door again, just like the last time, but this time in jeans and a sweater, barefoot on the wood floors. "Thanks for dinner," I said. "Thanks for saying yes," she replied. I hesitated at the threshold, like the night didn't quite want to end. She looked up at me, not like Mark's mom, not like someone older, but like someone seeing me fully, clearly. "Good night, Nathan," she said. I nodded. Good night." As I stepped out into the cool air and walked to my car, I felt that same flutter in my chest. Something between nerves and excitement. A shift I couldn't explain but didn't want to undo. It had been a week since that dinner at Isabella's house, and I still hadn't told Mark. Not that there was anything to tell, technically. It wasn't a date. She cooked dinner, we talked, I went home. But something about the way she looked at me near the door that night, soft, certain, quiet, it stayed with me. I caught myself thinking about her at random moments. At work, in class, in the shower, her voice, her laugh, the way she moved, like someone who didn't owe the world an explanation. Mark texted about meeting at O'Malley's, our usual spot, a neighborhood bar not far from campus, cheap drinks, decent food, and a familiar crowd. I figured it would be good to reset, laugh, play darts, forget the tension that had been building in my chest since that afternoon in her kitchen. I showed up. Mark was already there with a couple of our friends, Ryan and Devin. I slid into the booth, ordered a drink, and settled in. Everything felt normal. Loud music, dim lighting, people packed in at the bar, groups laughing too hard. We talked about finals, some party coming up, a dumb TikTok Mark was obsessed with. Then I saw her, Isabella, across the bar. She was with two other women about her age, all of them with that slightly effortless, well-put-together look that made them stand out from the usual bar crowd. She wore a black blouse, sleeves rolled just past her elbows, hair down in loose waves. She hadn't seen me yet, but I saw her laugh at something one of her friends said, her hand lightly touching the side of her face. That same gesture I remembered from dinner. I felt it immediately, a jolt. Not panic exactly, but close. Mark didn't notice, neither did Ryan or Devin. They were arguing about whether or not you could get drunk off those new hard seltzers. I glanced back toward her. She saw me, and everything slowed down for just a second. She didn't look surprised, she just smiled, subtle and knowing. Her eyes lingered a second longer than necessary. Then she looked away, but that moment, it changed the room for me. I excused myself under the pretense of grabbing another drink, making my way slowly toward the bar. I didn't walk directly to her, but I stood where she could see me. I ordered something I didn't really want, just to have an excuse to be there. I could feel her behind me before she even spoke. "You stalking me, Nathan?" she said, her voice just loud enough over the hum of the place. I turned, smiling. "You wish," she laughed. "Maybe I do." It felt like we were in our own little corner of the world, even though we were surrounded by people. I leaned against the bar. She sipped her drink. Her friends had drifted toward the dance floor, leaving her behind. "This your usual scene?" I asked. "Not really," she said, glancing around. "But sometimes I need to remind myself I'm still a person, not just someone's mom or someone's deadline." I nodded. I understood that more than I could say. For a moment, we stood in comfortable silence, the kind where neither of us felt the need to fill the space with words. Then she said quietly, "It's strange, you know what is? Feeling completely alone in a room full of people." Her words hit me harder than expected. I wasn't sure if she meant herself or me or both of us, but something about that sentence stuck. "You're not alone right now," I said. She looked up at me, her eyes softer than I remembered. "No," she said, "I'm not." Just then, Mark's voice cut through the crowd. "Yo, Nathan!" I turned, saw him waving me back to the table. The moment broke. Isabella straightened up, the quiet between us folding away, like a napkin being tucked back under the plate. "I should probably go," she said, glancing toward her friends. "Right," I nodded, not wanting to move. She leaned in slightly. "Good seeing you again." "Yeah," I said, "you too." She touched my arm gently, just for a second, then turned and walked back into the crowd. I stood there for a beat before heading back to the booth. Mark was mid-story about a girl he matched with who turned out to be vegan and gluten-free, and the way he told it made it sound like a crime. I laughed at the right parts, nodded when I had to, but my mind wasn't there. It was across the bar with her. Things didn't go back to normal after that night at O'Malley's, not for me. I kept replaying that brief moment with Isabella in my head, how close she stood, the way she said, "Maybe I do," the look in her eyes just before Mark called my name. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It wasn't just an awkward towel moment or a quiet dinner. Something had cracked open between us and I could feel it. Problem was, I don't think I was the only one. Mark had been off lately. Nothing dramatic, just more distracted than usual. One afternoon, we were walking back from the campus gym when he said out of nowhere, "I think my mom's going through something." I kept my face neutral. What do you mean? She's been acting different, quiet or staying up late, like the lights are still on when I get home from work, and she's just sitting in the kitchen drinking tea, staring at nothing. I nodded slowly. Maybe she's just tired, working too much. Maybe, he said, but his voice sounded unconvinced. That night stuck with me. I kept wondering how she looked when she was alone like that. If she was thinking about anything we'd said, if she remembered my hand brushing hers near the sink, if she wanted more. I was over at Mark's place to borrow a charger I'd left in his room. He went upstairs to grab it, and I stayed downstairs, scrolling through my phone on the couch. That's when I heard her, Isabella, coming down the stairs slowly. I looked up and saw her stop on the second to last step. She wasn't dressed fancy or anything, just a long sweater and leggings, barefoot. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't casual, it wasn't neutral. It was the kind of look that said she wasn't seeing me as just her son's friend anymore. I stood up, awkward at first. Hey. She stepped down the final stair, hands lightly clasped in front of her. Hey, she said back, a little softer. We stood there for a beat too long. Mark's just grabbing my charger, I said, suddenly aware of how quiet the house felt. She nodded, eyes still on mine. I figured. I thought she was about to say something else, something more, but Mark's voice broke in from upstairs. Got it. He jogged down and tossed me the charger. You still good to meet us later? Yeah, I said quickly, taking a step back. Definitely. He didn't seem to notice anything off, just nudged me toward the door and kept talking about some game night plan. But as I turned to leave, I glanced back. Isabella was still standing at the base of the stairs, eyes on me, her expression unreadable. After that, the air between us only thickened. Every time I came over, it was there, something unspoken just under the surface. She wouldn't always say much, sometimes just a quiet hi from the kitchen or a nod from the hallway. But every time I caught her eyes, it felt like she was holding back a question. And honestly, so was I. It got to the point where I'd start inventing reasons to be around, bringing over coffee for Mark, forgetting something I needed to pick up, checking if he was around when I already knew he wasn't. And every time, I hoped, expected, to see her. Sometimes I did. One afternoon, Mark wasn't home yet, and she answered the door. She didn't invite me in. She didn't smile the way she usually did. She just leaned against the door frame, arms crossed loosely, eyes steady. You've been around a lot lately, she said. I swallowed. Yeah, I mean, Mark's been asking me to. She interrupted gently. I wasn't complaining. There was a pause, then she added, It's just, I notice. That word notice hung in the air, like something heavier than it should have been. I nodded slowly. I think about that night. Her eyes didn't waver. Which one? The bookstore, dinner. She didn't look away. So do I. Before I could say anything else, she stepped back and said, Mark should be home any minute. You can wait if you want. I didn't go in. I just nodded again, said I'd catch him later, and left. My heart was pounding on the drive home, not from adrenaline, from the tension that was getting harder to keep quiet. She felt it too. We hadn't touched. We hadn't kissed. But something between us had crossed a line neither of us wanted to admit out loud, and the line kept getting thinner. It finally happened when Mark texted me, saying he'd be at the library late, some group project where half the people never show up, but somehow everyone gets the same grade. I told him I'd swing by the house to drop off another book I borrowed, a beat-up copy of East of Eden. He said to just leave it on the porch if he wasn't back yet. I told myself that's what I was going to do, but I didn't. I knocked instead. The porch light was already on, casting a warm glow across the faded blue wood. It was quiet, no sounds from inside at first. I waited. Then the door opened. Isabella. She looked surprised, but only for a second. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands framing her face. She wore a dark green sweater and those soft-looking joggers that weren't meant to impress anyone, which somehow made her even harder to ignore. I thought you were Mark, she said, voice low, almost a whisper. I held up the book. Just dropping this off. He said he'd be out. She nodded. He is. We stood there for a moment. The silence didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt loaded, like we both knew something was about to shift. You want to come in for a minute? She asked. I nodded, stepping past her into the house. The scent of something warm, jasmine tea, or maybe the remnants of dinner, floated in the air. The living room lights were off, just a small lamp glowing in the corner. She walked toward the kitchen. I made tea earlier, still warm if you want some. Sure, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. I followed her into the kitchen. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she was thinking through each step. She poured 2 mugs without asking what I wanted, like she already knew. The way she handed mine over, fingers brushing against mine, was the kind of small contact that somehow felt enormous. We didn't sit. We stood in the middle of the kitchen, leaning against opposite counters, holding mugs we barely sipped. I've been thinking about what you said the other day, she said suddenly. I looked up. What part? When you said you think about that night. I nodded. I haven't stopped. She exhaled, setting her mug down slowly. Neither have I. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. She looked at me for a long time, not like someone confused, not like someone wondering if this was right or wrong, but like someone who'd already decided and was just waiting for me to meet her there. I know this is complicated, she said softly. I nodded again. Yeah, but I don't care. She took 1 step toward me, just one. You should, she said. But I don't, I repeated. Another step. She was close enough now that I could feel the warmth of her skin, see the tiny freckle just above her collarbone, the way her pulse moved faintly at her neck. I don't know what this is, she said. I don't know where it goes. We don't have to know, I said. I just know I'm here and so are you. She looked at me, really looked, and in that moment the air between us snapped. She leaned in first. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry or messy. It was slow, quiet, intentional. Our lips met like we'd been circling that moment for weeks, each second leading us here. Her hands rested lightly on my chest, and I let mine settle at her waist. The kiss deepened slightly, but never lost its softness. There was no performance, no second guessing, just her, me, and the weight of everything unspoken finally finding a way out. When we pulled apart, she didn't step away. Her forehead rested lightly against mine. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered. But we are, I whispered back. We stood like that for another minute, eyes closed, breathing in sync. Then she stepped back gently, almost reluctantly. I don't want this to hurt anyone, she said, especially not Mark. I nodded. We'll be careful. She searched my face like she was testing if I meant it, then smiled, just barely, and picked up her mug again. I don't know what this is yet, she repeated, quieter this time. Maybe we don't need to name it, I said. The words felt simple but right. We stood in the kitchen a little longer, talking about nothing, both of us trying to come down from that moment without losing the thread between us. I left before Mark got home. We didn't talk about a next time, but we both knew there would be one. Time started folding in on itself after that night. We never called it anything. There were no labels, no long conversations about what we were doing. But the way we looked at each other had changed. The way we spoke, the way we moved when we were in the same room. Slower, quieter, more aware. That kiss in the kitchen wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. And once it started, we didn't stop. We just got better at hiding it. At first, our moments were small. A few minutes when Mark wasn't home, a passing brush of fingers as I left the house, a lingering glance across the hallway. Then it became more deliberate, timing visits for when we knew he'd be at work or class or staying over at a friend's. I'd find an excuse to swing by, something casual, and next thing I knew, we'd be in that in-between space again, where everything we weren't saying filled the room louder than any words. We didn't rush anything. It all moved slowly. She never pushed, neither did I, but there was an unspoken rhythm to us, like we both knew how fragile it was and didn't want to break it by moving too fast. The secrecy became part of it. The soft closing of doors, the way we listened for footsteps upstairs, the thrill of brushing against each other when no one was looking. But under all of that, something deeper was happening. One afternoon, I stayed longer than I meant to. Mark had texted that he'd be late getting back from work, and Isabella had made coffee. We sat on the back patio, both of us quiet, watching the light shift across the yard. She had a book in her lap she wasn't reading. I had a cup in my hand I'd forgotten to drink. "You ever think about what you'll be like at 40?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Not really," I said. "I can barely see past next semester." She laughed softly. "That makes sense. I didn't either at your age." There was a pause before she added, "I used to think I'd have everything figured out by now, the house, the career, the kid, check, check, check. But still, sometimes I wake up and feel like I'm waiting for my real life to start." I looked at her, unsure what to say. "You make me feel," she hesitated, searching for the words, "like I haven't missed it, like there's still something worth waking up for." I didn't respond, not right away. I just reached over and took her hand. That moment felt heavier than anything we'd done physically. It wasn't desire, it was closeness, real closeness. And I wasn't ready for how much I wanted that. We started finding new ways to meet. Early mornings when I'd bring over bagels before Mark woke up, short drives where she'd pick me up down the block, and we'd just sit in her car talking. Sometimes we didn't even touch. We just were in each other's presence, quiet and content. She opened up to me more with time, told me about how hard it had been after Mark's dad left, how she'd buried herself in work and parenting and never really looked back, how she hadn't let anyone in for years because it just felt easier to stay self-contained. "And then you," she said one night, curled up next to me on the couch while a record played low in the background. "You didn't come barging in, you just slipped through the cracks." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I kissed her. Guilt came in waves, mostly when I was around Mark, sitting on the porch with him, listening to him joke about finals or argue about baseball stats. I'd nod along like nothing was off, but underneath it, there was always this quiet weight, a voice in my head asking how long we could keep this going without something breaking. Still, I didn't stop. Neither did she. We kept choosing each other quietly, consistently, not with big declarations, but with glances across the room, with texts that just said now, with long drives, nowhere just to sit and exist outside of the world we weren't supposed to be part of. Some nights, when we lay close, barely talking, I'd trace the shape of her hand with mine and think, this can't last. But then she'd turn her face toward mine, eyes half-lidded and warm, and whisper, stay a little longer. And I always did. A full year passed before I even realized it. It's strange how time can slip like that, quiet and unannounced, threading moments together until you look up and realize seasons have changed, people have changed, you've changed. What started as a kiss in a dim kitchen became something more, something layered, hidden, unspoken, but deeply felt. Our relationship didn't live in the daylight. It lived in the margins. Early mornings before the world woke up, late nights after Mark went to sleep, quick visits that looked casual from the outside but meant everything to us inside. A birthday card slipped into a book, a soft touch beneath a shared blanket while a movie played too loud, tiny things that meant we were still choosing each other, carefully, deliberately. When winter came, Isabella kept the house warmer than usual. She said it was because she hated the cold, but I think she just liked the way it gave us an excuse to stay in. I remember one night, snow falling quietly outside, her wrapped in a thick cardigan, me sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the couch while she ran her fingers through my hair absent-mindedly. We weren't saying anything. We didn't need to. That night marked a full year since our first kiss. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both knew. The moment lived in the silence between us, and that was enough. In the spring, we met at a quiet park outside the city. She brought sandwiches, I brought books. We sat on a faded blanket under a crooked tree and spent half the afternoon like that, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You ever think about telling him?" She didn't need to say who. I stared out across the small pond. Ducks floated by, like they had nowhere else to be. Sometimes, I said, but then I don't, because I don't want to lose both of you. She nodded. I think about it too. Neither of us said anything after that for a while. Just listened to the wind through the branches. There were moments we slipped, tiny cracks, a missed text, a too long glance, a phrase only we used that slipped out in front of Mark. But somehow we held the illusion. Or maybe no one wanted to look too closely. She started referring to it as ours. Not this or what we're doing, but just ours. As in, let's keep this ours. It was her way of holding the line, of saying this didn't need to be justified to anyone else. I understood that. I lived in it too. Sometimes I'd go home and lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what it all meant, wondering if we were just waiting for the inevitable fall. But then I'd remember the way she looked at me when we were alone, like I was the only person in a room full of ghosts, and I'd stop questioning it. Not everything needs to be permanent to feel real. Some nights we just sat on the back porch, watching the city lights blink in the distance, her feet in my lap, her glass of wine barely touched. We didn't speak much on those nights. We didn't need to. The comfort was in the quiet. When summer returned, the rhythm stayed the same. I'd see her when I could. We moved through the world like normal people, like nothing was happening beneath the surface. She'd pass me in the hallway when I visited and say something small, "Hey, Nathan," like I hadn't traced the curve of her spine just 2 nights before. It never felt fake, just careful. Mark remained in the dark, and with each month that passed, telling him felt harder, like crossing back over a line we'd long since erased. I hated keeping that from him, but every time I came close, I saw the look on his face when he talked about how chill things were at home, how his mom seemed happier lately, how she'd started baking again, like she used to when he was a kid. And I'd swallow the truth because maybe she was happier. Maybe I had something to do with that. Maybe we both needed this more than either of us wanted to admit, even if it was a love that lived in the shadows. By the time summer settled in again, the secrecy didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt chosen. There was no more scrambling for excuses or watching the clock to sneak out in time. We had learned each other's rhythms, carved out quiet corners in our days where we could exist, untouched by anyone else's expectations. The thrill of hiding had faded, replaced by something calmer, something more like peace. We stopped pretending it was temporary. One Saturday morning, I helped Isabella repot a few plants on the back patio. Mark had gone on a weekend camping trip with friends, and the house felt wide open. She wore a loose shirt tied at the waist, her hands deep in soil, humming to herself between instructions about drainage and sunlight. I sat beside her, legs stretched out, brushing dirt from my jeans. "This feels like a real Saturday siesta," she said. "Borrowed one." I knew what she meant. Most of our time had been borrowed, taken quietly, carefully, always under the shadow of what we weren't allowed to be. But lately the fear had softened. We weren't rushing anymore. We weren't pretending it was a mistake we hadn't figured out how to undo. "I like our version of time," Shote said. She looked over, her smile soft. "Me too." We never had the talk, no moment where we sat down and defined anything. But somewhere along the way, we stopped asking whether we should be doing this. The question just didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the feeling, the stillness I only found when I was with her, the way she'd tilt her head when I was talking, like she was listening to something more than just my words, the way her hand would find mine, even when we weren't touching, the way I'd catch myself reaching for her before I'd even thought about it. There were no plans for the future, no escape routes, no talks of moving in or going public or drawing up timelines. It wasn't that we were avoiding it. We just didn't need to map it out. We were already in it. This wasn't a bridge to something else. This was the thing. One night I brought over takeout, and we ended up sitting on the floor with our backs against the couch, laughing over something dumb. Some video she'd found of a day trying to talk like a person. She laughed so hard she leaned into me and didn't lean back. After the laughter faded, she said almost absently, "If anyone ever finds out, I'll just say we were happy." It was the kind of sentence that didn't need a response, just the warmth of her against my shoulder, The quiet agreement between us that some things didn't have to be defended if they were real. She never asked me to choose, never asked me to give anything up. But I had already made my choice long ago. One evening, as we watched the sun melt behind the city skyline, I asked, "Do you ever wish it were different?" She thought about it. "Sometimes," she said, "but not enough to want to trade what we have for what people think we're supposed to be." She looked at me, brushing her thumb across my front knuckles. "I don't want public," she added. "I just want present." That stuck with me because that's exactly what it was. A love built quietly, lived fully, held close. Sometimes we went a week without seeing each other. Life got in the way, work, school, summer plans, people. But it never felt like distance. It just felt like space we'd come back from. I'd text her a photo of something small, my coffee, a book page, a song title, and she'd send back a heart or a memory or a line from a poem she said reminded her of me. We existed in the margins, and yet it felt more real than anything I'd ever known. By August, the days stretched long and hot. I stopped thinking about when it might end. We had passed that point. There was no ending to prepare for, no goodbye waiting in the wings, just a quiet unfolding of days we built together in plain sight, unnoticed by everyone but us. Sometimes I'd sit on the back steps and watch her move through the house, talking on the phone, folding a blanket, pouring wine, and I'd feel this deep, full kind of contentment, like I had found something the world didn't get to name or understand. But I knew what it was. It was ours, not loud, not visible, but deeply real, a bond that didn't need approval, just presence. So we stayed where we were, together, apart, hidden, but whole, living a kind of love that didn't chase attention, didn't beg for permission, just two people choosing each other again and again. And honestly, I didn't need anything more than that. What does it mean to find a connection that feels so real it reshapes your world, yet thrives in the quiet margins of secrecy? As you immerse yourself in Nathan and Isabella's story, ask yourself, when have you stumbled into a moment that felt undeniably true, even if it existed outside the rules? Their journey, sparked by a fleeting encounter and a whispered invitation to stay a little longer, invites us to explore a profound lesson. Life's deepest bonds often grow in the unspoken spaces where vulnerability and authenticity outweigh the need for labels. What can we learn from their careful dance of hidden glances and shared silences? Doesn't it challenge us to consider how we balance our truest desires against the expectations we carry? Nathan, a college student tethered to routine, finds in Isabella a presence that makes him feel alive, seen beyond his role as a friend's sidekick. Her words, "I don't want public, I just want present," reveal a truth. Genuine connection doesn't need validation to be meaningful. Their story, woven with stolen moments, quiet confessions, and a refusal to define what's unfolding, teaches us that love, even in the shadows, can be a powerful force for self-discovery. The guilt and risk they navigate mirror our own struggles to honor what feels right, even when it's complicated. Haven't we all faced moments where we chose authenticity over safety, knowing the cost? Their bond, fragile yet steadfast, reminds us to cherish the present, even when the future is uncertain. When have you found a connection that felt real, despite its risks? What moments have you chosen to live fully, labels aside? Share your story in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else's courage. If this tale touched you, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Let's keep exploring the lessons that make us whole together.